My family makes decisions by spreadsheet, exactly the way that you would expect two parents who are engineers and two kids who are management consultants to make decisions. And when it came to finding me a spouse, we did exactly that. We used a spreadsheet. More specifically, we used the candidate evaluation spreadsheet. The candidate evaluation spreadsheet was created by my father with family input and buy-in and lists 22 separate criteria. Criteria are of two types: binary criteria for things like religion and sect, and then quantitative criteria for things like education, family values, and attractiveness, which my father calls overall physical disposition. The spreadsheet also comes with a benchmark. The current benchmark is the husband of a cousin of mine. He scored an 83 out of 100. We found him a few years ago, and he's proved to be more of an asset than a liability, so we go with it. The spreadsheet also has instructions to be helpful to users in calibrating their scores. So in like the age criteria, it says, full points for same age. Deduct 1 point for every 2-year delta. Overall, the spreadsheet is used to plug in candidates as assessed by my parents and decide whether or not they get an in-person interview. Basically, a date with me. For those candidates that don't meet the 80 out of 100 threshold, one of my parents informs one of their parents that while we appreciate their application, we regret to inform them they will not be moving forward in this process. In January of 2013, I received an email from my father. Following the defined process, your mother and I have actively been searching for candidates for you and are pleased to report that we believe we have found one that we think may be a good match. May be a good match? This guy was an amazing match. This guy was a 90. The benchmark cousin was an 83. The highest we had ever seen up to this point was an 85. And here, before our very own eyes, was a living, breathing 90. So naturally, I agreed to speak with him. A few days later, I received an email. Hello, my name is Reza. I'm 27 years old. I live in New York, and I look forward to learning more about you. And learn more we did. Our first phone conversation lasted 3 hours, and I loved how he seemed to embody all of these Pakistani values while also having the most wonderfully American accent. He had perfect grammar and this SAT-approved vocabulary. He used the word epitome 3 times in that first conversation. Like when I answered the phone, he was like, wow, isn't this process the epitome of awkwardness? And at the end of that first phone call, he asked me in the most polite, most gentlemanly way possible, would it be okay if I called you again tomorrow? We met for the first time 2 weeks later in New York City, and he got instant points for suggesting that we meet up at the donut plant. A man who likes donuts is a man I can spend my life with. I showed up lugging my giant weekend bag, and there he was, and we didn't shake hands, and we didn't hug, and we completely avoided physical contact, exactly the way our very Muslim parents would have wanted for our first date. And the first thing he asked me was, would you like to store your bag in my car so you don't have to carry it around? I silently ticked off thoughtful and considerate on my mental checklist of things I was looking for. And I thanked my lucky stars that in addition to being thoughtful and considerate, he was tall and good-looking. But not good-looking in like a New York City banker kind of way, more good-looking in like a clean and well-groomed kind of way. So like hair well-combed, shirt tucked in, smelling of freshly done laundry. We joked around about how hard and weird it was to be Muslim in America, and I found him asking me a lot of questions interested in why I believed in what I believed and less what I actually believed in. And that night, in a fit of what can only be described as complete insanity, I sent him a 6-page long email detailing all of the reasons why I chose to cover my hair. I titled the email, "This May Be TMI." He responded almost instantly with, "Thank you for trusting me enough to be TMI." As we spoke more that week, and as my family did intense Google and Facebook stalking, we learned a few things, though, that didn't exactly help his case. Turns out, Reza had just left his big law firm job in order to start his own practice. Bold entrepreneur, or destined to be poor. Spreadsheet said -5 for stable employment, down to an 85. But it was still okay, still well above passing. We were doing all right. Turns out, however, when he left his job, he also decided to move back home in order to save a little bit of money. Not ideal. He lost 3 points under optimal living conditions, down to an 82. But what about his perfectly combed hair, his lovely accent, his use of the word epitome? Weren't those worth points? And then he told me he had had a broken engagement. Me, I figured life happens. The parents, they looked at the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet said -3 for broken engagement. And just like that, my perfect 90 was down to a 79, below passing. And as much as I thought that maybe there was something there, and as much as I thought that he was special, the thing is that it is supremely hard to fight for somebody that you've only known for 2 weeks. The parents, they were done. They initiated the candidate obliteration process. Step 1, his parents are issued the usual thanks but no thanks email. Step 2, I delete his phone number and all of the emails that we've ever exchanged. Step 3, I try as hard as I can to forget about him and his deep, deep dimples. Life moved on. The spreadsheet moved on. And this time, it identified a candidate that seemed perfect on paper. A 91. On track to become an executive at a startup, picked me up for our first date in a shiny black Mercedes, tall, dark, and handsome. This guy was cool, like really cool, like rooftop parties, only eats organic, goes to pump weights at the gym on weekends, kind of cool. And one of the first questions he asked me when we met was, "So, what celebrity do you think I most look like?" I don't know. And then the unthinkable happened. The cardinal rule of the entire arranged marriage process was broken. 3 months after receiving his rejection notice, Reza emailed me. And I was like, oh my God. So I called my best friend, and she was like, oh my God. And we sat there staring in disbelief at my Gmail inbox. There it was, just a short, "Was in DC, thought of you, how are things going?" kind of email. The one thing you never, ever do is reach back out to someone once the parents have decided it's over. Dude, don't you get it? You've been obliterated. So I figured maybe he wants to be friends. So I asked my brother, "Do you think he wants to be friends?" He does not want to be friends. So I sat there. There was the 79. What should I do? Did I dare break the rules and email him anyway? What about the 91 that I had waiting to take me to dinner? And as I thought about it, I remembered that my father had met the 91. And as he was leaving, my dad had mentioned something under his breath, and it had sounded kind of like, "Thoda sa hi-fi lagta hai." Translation, seems a bit too cool for school, huh? Would the 91 be impressive? Hell yeah. Would he ever come to love my crazy spreadsheet-loving family? I wasn't so sure. So even though chemistry was rated well below employment status, living conditions, education, I decided to tentatively start to craft an email response to Reza. Now, I didn't want to seem desperate, but I still liked him, so I counted the number of lines in the email that he sent me. And I responded with exactly the same number of lines. Nothing more, nothing less. And lo and behold, he responded. And we emailed back and forth, but I was careful. I didn't want to come off too strong, but I still kind of really liked him. So I would end all my emails with non-questions. So if he ever didn't respond, I could be like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting him to respond. I was just being polite by responding to him, you know?" So stuff like, "Have a nice Ramadan," or "Hope you have a good weekend." But the thing is, he would always come back. "Funny you should mention Ramadan. I love Ramadan. Do you like Ramadan? What do you do for Ramadan? What are your family's traditions in Ramadan? Oh, so interesting that you mentioned weekends. Last weekend, I went to my friend's wedding. This weekend, I'm going on a bike ride. Do you like bikes? What do you think of weekends? What's your favorite weekend thing to do?" It was impossible not to respond to this guy. Eventually, I told my parents what was going on. "Hey, Ammi, Papa, remember that guy I was talking to in January?" "Yes, beta, the one we obliterated." "Yeah, that guy. Well, I'm still talking to him." They were surprised, but a few days later, they received a phone call from Reza's dad. "Mr. and Mrs. Zaidi, I know we have been through this, but my son Reza has met many girls since meeting your daughter, and he keeps rejecting them. He says none of them are like her. Do you think we might be able to give this another shot?" My family still makes most decisions by spreadsheet, including vehicle purchases, vacation destination identification, and restaurant selection. But the fact that I am happily married to Reza and the fact that he just created an epic 10-tab spreadsheet for a joint family vacation to Morocco taught us all that some decisions are best left to the heart.